So today we will study from 2 Samuel chapter 4. Last week, Rajiv covered chapter 3, and we saw how David dealt with the death of Abner last week. Today we will study chapter 4 and the first 5 verses of chapter 5, because chapter 5, verse 3 brings us to a conclusion of a certain part of 1st and 2nd Samuel. So throughout 1st Samuel and 2nd Samuel so far, from the time of the anointing of David, we saw a thread of events happening, right? We were revealed, we were made to see a thread of events as it progressed towards David becoming king of Israel. And that was God's plan for Israel. That was God's plan for why he chose David. And in chapter 5, verse 3, there's a culmination of this thread of events when David is anointed king of all Israel. So this is going to be the third time that he's anointed king. First, when Samuel anointed him when he was 15. Then when Judah made him king over Judah. And now in chapter 5, verse 3, all of Israel together asked David to be their king. Okay. Since we are studying a set of events, I thought it'll be a good checkpoint for us to look at what are the perspective with which we should look at events that we study, both in the Old Testament as well as the New Testament, particularly in the Old Testament portions that we are looking at. So there were three perspectives, I think, that we can take, or three approaches that we can take to put what we are studying in the right context and get the best that we can, because the scripture has a lot to offer. The first of these perspectives is to view the events that we are studying in the light of God's purposes. There is always the literal part of it. You read it, there's some literal meaning that you get out of it. But take that and view it in the light of God's purposes. So God reveals his purposes through the word, through the Bible, right? So that's one thing. Look for what is God's purpose in this set of events that we are studying. The second is, look at the events in the light of the author's Holy Spirit inspired perspective. Like Paul wrote to Timothy in 2 Timothy, every scripture is inspired by God and it's useful for teaching, for reproof, for correction, for training in righteousness. Okay. So when Paul wrote that every scripture was inspired by God, look at it this way. It's like a boat, a sailboat, right? The propulsion in the boat is not through a motor or through oars. It is through sails, through the wind filling the sail. So think of a sailboat where the wind is blowing into the sail and directing the movement of the boat. So that's the picture that Paul gives Timothy of every scripture is inspired by God. So the author of the word, the specific portion that you're reading, is like a sail that is filled with the breath of the Holy Spirit, and it moves him to write, inspires him to write. So view the portion you're reading, the events you're studying, in the light of the author's Holy Spirit inspired perspective. So very often you will see the author giving you some editorial information. These events happened. This is how you're supposed to view it. This is what it means. Okay, so search for that perspective. The third is to view the events in the light of the New Testament revelation. The Old Testament is best understood in the light of the New Testament revelation, because it's all culminating to Jesus and salvation, right? So always look for, and the Bible, we can be sure, is consistent. So always look at the events in the light of what does the New Testament have to reveal further to us about the specific events and whatever we are learning about in the New Testament. What revelation does it give us? Additional revelation. Okay. So we'll try to adopt these three principles in our study today. First, like I said, we're going to do chapter 4, 1, all the way up to chapter 5, verse 5. So we can see throughout this portion, actually, I'm going to go back all the way to 1st Samuel, certain parts of 1st Samuel, because I'm focusing on David becoming king as the key thing here. Okay, so we will look at how throughout this portion, especially culminating in today's studies, we will see how God's hand has always been directing events in David's life. Why do I say that? Because we saw a certain turn of events, right? A lot of events happening which were unexpected, which seemed to be, which were spiritually determined, where God removes all possible other claimants to the kingship of Israel except David. We saw how Saul's life ended. We saw how Abner was comes to an end. Today we will see some more. We will see how Ishbosheth dies. We'll see how uh, the surviving son of Jonathan is seen as not king material. So there is, and also David could have been killed many times, and God sustains his life, right? So through these turn of events, we see how God sustains David and also removes all possible other claimants except David to the kingship of Israel. And that is God's purpose for Israel, God's purpose for David's life, God's plan and purpose for Israel. Okay. By the same turn of events, we can see how David was shielded from temptation to accelerate his kingship. Right? There are several opportunities we will look at where David got an opportunity where he could have done something, and by his action, he could have claimed claimed the throne, claimed his kingship. But there, and he was shielded from these temptations many times. We will look at what was David's faith. What are the reasons why David was shielded from temptations? Both by his own hand he could have done it. Sometimes there were kingmakers that came up, right? We saw the Amalekite. We saw Abner as a kingmaker last time. Today we'll see two more brothers who try to accelerate David's ascension to the throne. But David shields, he's willing to wait on the Lord's timing. And like we studied in chapter 3, while you wait, it can be a period of great temptation. So during this long period of 22 years that David had to wait from his anointing, how he was shielded from temptation to accelerate his kingship. The last thing we can see is in the process, through while we study these events, we will also see why David was king, God's elect, and why the Bible says he was a man after God's own heart, despite his several weaknesses and failings. Okay. Having said that, let's take a quick overview, a bird's eye view of today's portion. The first part is chapter 5, verse 1 to 12. Okay. So the key thing in this is Ishbosheth is assassinated. And who does it? There are two Benjaminite brothers. So Benjaminite means they are part of Ishbosheth's family. Ishbosheth is Saul's son, and they come from the tribe of Benjamin. So Bana and Rechab see Ishbosheth. Now Abner was killed in the last chapter, right? So without Abner, he was the force behind Ishbosheth. So without Abner, these Benjaminite brothers, and probably if they felt so, there were others who thought so too, felt that without Abner, Ishbosheth is a weak king. And this is not the king we want. So what do? They're opportunists. They seize the opportunity to eliminate this weak king, to pave the way for a stronger King David. Okay. In a way, you can say they probably had Israel's interests at heart. We don't know. That's a guess. Let's just leave that aside. But what we do see is that here are two more people who are kingmakers, who are trying to accelerate David's ascension to the throne. The only other candidate to the throne was possibly Jonathan's son, that is Saul's grandson, Mephibosheth. But he, we were told in a small editorial comment, was crippled as a child, right? When his nursemaid was trying to flee with him, she drops him and he gets crippled. Therefore, he does not, in the eyes of Israel, would not be seen as king material. One, he's too young at this time. And second, a cripple could not provide good military leadership, right? So these two brothers expect, when they kill Ishbosheth and cut off his head and take it to David as a trophy, they expect that David is going to be delighted that all obstacles to his kingship are removed. So they proclaim to David in verse 8, look, the head of Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, your enemy who sought your life, the Lord has granted vengeance to my Lord, that is to David, the king, against Saul and his descendants. So they cloak their act under the guise of enacting the Lord's will for Saul and for David. Okay, but David's response surprises them. For us, we shouldn't be surprised because we know how David responds to people who touch the Lord's anointed, Saul, or even Saul's family. And David responds back to them saying, haven't you learned your lesson? Haven't you heard what I did to the Amalekite, who similarly claimed that he killed Saul? right? Surely I see this as a wicked act. So when wicked men have killed an innocent man as he sleeps in his own house, should I, the king, the person who is supposed to administer justice, shall I not require the blood of this wicked man? Now your hands are filled with the blood that you have shed of an innocent man. And therefore, David sentences the two brothers to be executed for their violation of God's law. So David is playing his kingly role of judging them, right? And he sentences them to death, which is by God's law for murder that they commit. Now, having covered that part, the first question we want to look at is, what is David's response in similar situations? The key situations that we should look at is all the situations that in some way connected with opportunities or events that were directed towards making David king. The first two are from 1 Samuel. You'll all remember that David had two opportunities to kill Saul. The first was in chapter 24, when Saul stumbles into the cave where David and his soldiers are hiding, right? And David has his opportunity, and he's actually coaxed by his people to kill Saul, end their running around and ascend to the throne. But David refuses to do that. So that's the first situation that you must bear in mind. The second is 2 chapters later in 26, David stealthily creeps into Saul's tent along with one of his soldiers, and he has an opportunity to kill Saul. Saul is at his mercy. But even here, David refuses to kill Saul, right? So that's the second situation. If you had an opportunity, you would have read and focused on David's words in both these opportunities. The third opportunity that came David's way was when the Amalekite brings news of killing Saul. Right? So he thought that was good news, and we know what happened in first chapter of 2 Samuel. Last chapter also, we saw Abner, the powerful Abner, who wanted to be a kingmaker. He has plans to make David king. David actually welcomes the plans because it's a peaceful transition, but Abner ends up murdered by Joab. And we saw how David responded to that. So we will look at some of the words that David used in that particular event to see how David responds to that particular situation also. And finally, today's portion, where the two brothers kill Ishbosheth to clear the way for David to become king. So these 5 situations, in all of them, which are directed towards in some way making it easy for David to become king, what do you see as a pattern in David's response to each of these situations? Was his response consistent in all way, or were they random and inconsistent? So that's the first question to dwell on. Okay, so let's dig into this. We'll go each one of those situations one by one, okay? First, we will look at the situation. We will take 2 situations together. The 2 situations from 1 Samuel, where David spares Saul's life. And I'm just picking on David's words. The first time when he has Saul within his grasp in the cave, David tells his men, "May the Lord keep me far from doing such a thing to my Lord," that is Saul, who is the Lord's chosen one, by extending my hand against him. After all, he is the Lord's chosen one. That is first. That's how David sees it when he had an opportunity to kill Saul in the cave. The second time, when David had an opportunity, along with Abishai, to kill Saul in his own tent, David tells Abishai. Abishai offers to kill him. He says, like, if you cannot do it, I will do it. Right? I will drive my spear through him. And David tells him, don't kill him. Who can extend his hand against the Lord's chosen one and remain guiltless? David went on to say, as the Lord lives, the Lord himself will strike down. Either his day will come, that is Saul's day will come and he will die, or he will go down into battle and be swept away. But may the Lord prevent me from extending my hand against the Lord's chosen one. So we see great patience here, right? He is willing to wait until Saul passes away and the way is clear for him to go ascend the throne. So what are the characteristics of David that we can see in this portion? Some of the authors inspired, he's trying to tell us something about David, right? So one is we see David's complete submission to the Lord's sovereignty. Then we also see the respect that David has for the Lord's anointed and his great willingness to wait on the Lord's timing, however long it be. Remember the second situation, he says, either Saul's day will come and he will die. So however long that is, I'm willing to wait, right? Second set of situations. We'll club two together again because they're similar. The Amalekite who comes and claims he kills Saul to David's advantage, and the two brothers in today's portion. How did David respond to the Amalekite? He said, "How is it that you were not afraid to reach out your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed? Your blood be on your own head. Your mouth has testified against you, saying, I have put the Lord's anointed to death." So, first of all, he expects a person who has resided in Israel, who's taken citizenship there, though he's a foreigner, to know the Lord's laws and to know the regard with which David holds Saul and the reason for that. And he's surprised that even with this knowledge, the Amalekite dared to do what he did, right? So he's actually trying the Amalekite in front of himself, like it's like a court, right? It's like he's a trial that he's doing, and he finds that this person has no excuse, right? He is responsible for murder, especially a heinous murder because it's the Lord's anointed, and he sees by the Lord's law, his blood is on his own head because he himself has testified against himself, right? So he sentences the Amalekite to death. In the second situation, today's situation, David tells the brothers, "As surely as the Lord lives, who has delivered my life from all adversity. When someone told me that Saul was dead, even though he was bringing me good news, he thought he was bringing me good news, I cease and kill him. That was the good news I gave him. Surely when wicked men have killed an innocent man as he slept in his house, should I not now require his blood? Your hands, he required his blood that your hands shed and remove you from the earth." I think I missed some words there. Okay. So some interesting things here. One is David is testifying that I do not need you or what you did for me to ascend the throne. The Lord has seen and guided my paths all these days, right? Second, you must have heard how I regard Saul, the same message he gave the Amalekites, right? And you know how I responded to that. So if I could hold Saul in great regard because he's the Lord's anointed, surely I will hold his son, who's an innocent man, a murder of even his son as a wicked act, right? So again, he's trying them, finding them guilty, and he's sentencing them to death, right? So he has no hesitation to serve out just punishment. Just punishment because he has tried them and found them in violation of God's laws, right? And he has an expectation that Israel respects the Lord's sovereignty and laws. So he's sharing his testimony and he's telling them, right? I'm surprised that you still think, after what you have heard, that I would view your actions favorably. And second, again, we see that when he says, "No, the Lord has delivered my life from all adversity," it's a way of saying, I'm willing to wait on the Lord's timing. I do not need you to catalyze the situation, to accelerate the situation. Okay. Let's now look at the last situation, which is what Rajiv shared with us last time in this lesson. Okay. We look at some parts of David's explicit response on hearing of Abner's murder. First, the first reaction David had on hearing of Abner's murder. He said, "My kingdom and I are guiltless before the Lord forever from the blood of Abner, the son of Ner. Let it rest on the head of Joab and all his father's house, and let there never fail to be in the house of Joab. Let there never," I'm missing some words there again, "who has a discharge or is a leper." So someone who's a discharge or is a leper is seen as unclean and cannot approach the Lord. So he's saying, let them be cut off from the Lord, right? And all of what the curses, everything that he curses Joab and his family, are curses that the Lord only can bring about, right? So he's asking that the Lord cut him off, because in effect, what David is doing when he's cursing is he's not visiting his own curse. He's repeating the curses that God had laid out in his law as what would happen when someone violates the Lord's law. So he's saying, Lord, by your law, you would consider someone who does what Joab did as someone who cannot approach you, right? So he's asking that the Lord bring that to pass, right? That they will not prosper. So he's asking the Lord to bring that to pass, right? So what are the characteristics of David's response? One is he's acknowledging that David's killing was murder first, right? And that Joab is guilty regardless of what he claims. And Joab was claiming that he acted on behalf of Judah's national interest. But there is an editorial comment that the author puts in chapter 3, verse 30, that tells us that this is how the author views David's response, right? In verse 30, he says, can someone read that? I forgot my specs and I'm having a little bit of a struggle reading. Okay, I'll read that. In my Bible, or in some Bibles, I think it'll be in brackets. So whenever you see parenthesis, it's like an editorial insert, author's view on the set of events. So verse 30 says, Joab and his brother Abishai murdered Abner because he had killed their brother Asahel in the battle of Gibeon. So regardless of what Joab claimed as his motive, the author and David see it as murder. Okay. The next thing we can see is, in this first response that David has, is his reliance on God's justice in time. So even though he is not able to, we will look at why David is not able to himself give out justice. He's relying on God's justice in time, right? His faith that God will visit his justice on all sin is very strong, though he personally is too weak to administer justice in this situation. Next, the second thing is, words of David is, we can look at his lament. So David publicly leads the people of Judah in mourning for Abner. So it's a public display of his heart. And his lament also says, should Abner die as a fool dies? Your hands were not bound, nor your feet put in fetters. As a man falls before wicked men, you fell. So he's saying Abner should not, this is not the death that Abner should have had. He was a warrior, right? And the way he died was a criminal, by virtue of a criminal act, right? So David is expressing great sorrow at the death without honor of Abner. And if you read further, no, when we read later also, we'll see that one of the reasons for his sorrow is the loss. Abner's death represents a great loss to Israel. He could have been a great asset to Israel. So in Abner's death, David is also mourning the loss for Israel. So David's heart is on Israel. And that is where, remember, always we knew that David and Jonathan shared the same passion. And that passion was the Lord's purposes for Israel. And that we see here also. Second, David is leading Judah's public mourning for a person, that is Abner, who could have been classified as an enemy of Judah, because chapter 3 starts out by telling us that there was a war between the family of Saul and the family of David, right? And the family of David is Judah, so he could have been public Judah's enemy number one. But David is leading a public mourning for someone who, through normal life, should have been viewed as an enemy. Next, David's concern for all Israel. So the reason why David is mourning is his concern for all of Israel supersedes a narrower view that he could have taken of Judah's self-interest. So that's another characteristic that we can see of David, okay, through this response. The third words of David that I want to pick on is David shares his inner conflicts and concerns in private to his close aides. So in verse 38 and 39 of last chapter, we will see he tells his servants or his aides, his close servants, do you not know that a prince and a great man has fallen this day in Israel? So again, it's mapped through Israel, through the lens of Israel's interest that he sees this event. And I am weak today, though anointed king, and these men, the sons of Zeruiah, are too harsh for me. The Lord will repay the evildoer according to his wickedness. So what can we see about David here? One is his concern for Israel, like we said last time, supersedes a narrower view that he could have taken of Judah's self-interest. Second, David's acknowledgement that justice has not been done because of his own inner conflicts. So he's confessing that he has inner conflicts. I'm not able to act against Joab. Perhaps it's because he is his own nephew. Perhaps it's because Joab is too important for Israel at this point in time. But surely he should have acted against him. He is not able to. But his faith that God's justice will be visited on Joab in time, in God's time, is very strong. So he says, though I cannot do it, the Lord will not spare Joab, even though I personally at this point cannot do it. So from all of this, what can we see about David, right? So whatever the author has written for us through his inspired vision of the events, we see that David never loses his vision for the Lord's purposes for Israel, right? That the world was, what was the Lord's purpose for Israel? That the entire world is to be blessed through Abraham's seed, and Israel is a step in that progression. So David had promised Abraham that through his seed, all of the world, earth would be blessed. And Israel is a progression from David's seed. So David is sharing that vision. He's part of that progression, that progressive plan of the Lord. And David never loses sight of the vision of the Lord for Israel as one cog in the wheel, right? From Abraham to Jesus. Then we see that David's enduring faith in God and his acknowledgement continuously of God's sovereignty. Even in moments of personal weaknesses, we have seen that he acknowledges God and he has faith in God, right? Next, we see David's willingness to wait on God's timing. Several opportunities, but he never preempts God's plan to clear the way for him to become king. He is willing to wait however long it requires for God to clear the way and put him on the throne. Next is David's acknowledgement that imperfect men like himself, who are marred by their own weaknesses, cannot be perfect judges and deliver justice. So David is freely acknowledging, transparently acknowledging that I am weak. And in my weakness, sometimes I cannot be a perfect judge and deliver justice. And David has a faith that God will deliver justice. So what is that telling us about David's faith? David's faith is that a perfect God will be a perfect judge and will deliver perfect justice in his time. So that is the corollary of the first part. So if David says that I cannot deliver justice, he's confessing that's because he is weak, like all men, and cannot be a perfect judge. And unless he's only a perfect judge can deliver justice. And he's looking to God as a perfect judge. And he knows, he has the faith that this perfect judge is going to deliver perfect justice, but in his time. Okay, that's what we can learn from all these events so far. Now, chapter 5, verses 1 to 5. This is a small portion. David is now king, right? All the elders come to him and they ask, all the tribes of Israel are represented. They come to David and ask him to be their king. It is very interesting because David has had to wait 22 years for this moment. And it's also interesting because this is not the first time all of Israel is requesting a king. The first time it happened was in 1 Samuel chapter 8, verse 4 and 5, when they went to Samuel and told him, Samuel, we do not have confidence in your sons. Till now, you led us, right? We had judges, prophets, priests as our leaders, but we are not seeing your sons as worthy of that. We do not have confidence. Look at the nations around us. They have kings to lead them, and the kings fight their battles. What does it mean? Because you have a king, you'll have a standing army, and we want that model. This model does not work any longer, right? So that's the first situation. And today's situation, you see how they come to David. Mark the words that they use to ask David to be their king. So what the question, when we look at this portion, what we can do is try to compare these two situations. The first time when they demanded a king from Samuel, and the second time when they approached David to be their king. What is the difference that we see between the two situations? That's the next question for us to deliberate on. Anybody else? Okay, so let's get into this. Let's look into this. So the first situation, when Israel demanded a king rather than a priest, prophet, judge as leader to be like the white, so that they could be like the other nations. The grass was greener on the other side, so to be like the other nations around them, right? So we saw in that part that a rebellious Israel rejects God's model of leadership. Then Israel was to be, in God's purpose, a model representing Yahweh, right? They are like the lamp that should not be hidden. They are supposed to represent Yahweh in Israel, through Israel, to the surrounding nations. When they rejected God's model of leadership, they were also saying that they were unwilling to stand out from the other nations. They wanted to be like the other nations, right? So Israel is granted a king. In the first situation we saw, as a result of this, Israel is granted a king, a man after their own heart. So Saul was a handsome young man. There was no one among the Israelites more handsome than he was. He stood head and shoulder above all the people. So the person that was anointed for them was someone just like what they would want, right? Meanwhile, did the Lord stop there? He does not. The Lord continues to further his purpose through his elect David for his chosen people Israel, because a short while after that, a short encounters and exploits of Saul, and Samuel is told that the Lord has sought out for himself another man, a man who is loyal to David. The Lord's time has come, the Lord's man has come, and the Lord has elected him, and he is a man who is loyal to the Lord, and the Lord will appoint him. We're talking about David as a leader over his people. So even when this is happening, we know that the Lord is working in the background, right? Second situation, today's study, all the tribes of Israel come to David at Hebron and request him to be king. What are their words? They say, look, we are your very flesh and blood. In the past, when Saul was our king, you were the real leader in Israel, right? So you were king of Judah, Saul was our king, Saul's descendants were our king, son was our king of over all Israel, but you were the real leader. So the Lord said to you, and why? The Lord said to you, you will shepherd my people Israel, you will rule over Israel. So it's very obvious that they knew that the Lord, there is a strong recognition by Israel that the Lord was always at work, even when they were in rebellion. Even before they rebelled, even though they rebelled, God's purpose for Israel, they knew, remained steadfast, and that he would pick a man after his own heart to lead his people. They are acknowledging now that David as their shepherd king, right? They're saying David is their shepherd king. What is the kind of king they wanted earlier? Someone who would fight their battles for them. And now they're realizing the king they need is the king that God picked, someone who would be a shepherd king. They knew that God through Samuel had anointed David as king, and he was indeed the best choice. That's what we can see. And now they're confessing that they were wrong, not to wait on the Lord's choice and timing. So when they compare Saul and say, though Saul was a king, you were the real leader. That's, you have all the qualities and you are the Lord's choice. So there's a confession here that they were wrong not to wait on the Lord's choice and timing, that they were premature in demanding a king, and their premature choice, the result of their premature choice of Saul was wrong. Okay. So in summary, viewing the scripture. So that second perspective, when you view the scripture through God's perspective, what can we see from all that we have studied until this part? We see that God purposes to bless the earth through his chosen people. That has been God's purpose all along. So that is one of God's purpose, right? Why? God's steadfast purpose to bless the Lord through his chosen people, even when they rebel and pull in different direction, reveals God's mercy and love for us, right? So that is one of God's purpose, and that's what it reveals about God's character. The second purpose of God is to fulfill his word. Why? God's steadfast purpose to fulfill his word reveals his faithfulness. And to us, it tells us that you can trust God to what he promises. He is faithful, right? And his word will come to pass. Third, God purposes to punish sin and reward righteousness. Why do we say that? God steadfastly purposes to punish sin and reward righteousness. This reveals a righteous character of God. So God is righteous and just. He would not be God at all if he were not, right? So we see that even in temporary injustice, in the face of temporary injustice, weakness in the people who are supposed to administer justice, God's purpose will remain steadfast. His purpose to punish sin and reward righteousness. Why is it that we can expect God to do that? Because he is righteous and because he's a perfect judge, right? So that is the other thing that we can. God is righteous and just. So that's the other thing that we can see through this portion, right? So picking on all those three things, I just wanted to pick on the injustice part of it for today's deliberation in our breakout, right? So we see that in many situations, David responded differently. In some cases, he administered justice instantly. In some cases, due to his own weakness, as he confesses, he was not able to administer justice. though he has the faith and confidence that God will do so, right? What does the New Testament reveal to us about justice, right? So Matthew 5, this is Jesus' own words after the Sermon on the Mount portion. Jesus tells the people that you have heard that it is said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the evildoer. Whoever strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other to him also. If someone sues you, let him take your tunic. For your tunic, let him take your coat also. If anyone asks you to go 1 mile, go 2 miles with him, right? Then love your neighbor and hate your enemy is what you have been taught to believe. But I say to you, love your enemy, pray for those who persecute you. Why? So that you may be like your Father in heaven. And Paul reemphasizes this in his letter to the Romans when he says, if possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all people. Do not avenge yourself, dear friends, but give place to God's wrath, for it is written, vengeance is mine, and I will repay, says the Lord. Rather, if your enemy is hungry, Paul says, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him a drink. For in doing this, you will be heaping burning coals on his head. Why? Because the Lord's justice is going to be visited on him. But in your action of being merciful, what are you trying to do? What you could do is probably you could overcome evil with good. There's a possibility of that. And that's our mandate, right? So with that revelation, New Testament revelation on justice, the breakout question for us is, as a Christian, what should your response be to injustice when it is done either to you or to others in your where you can see justice being done to others? It's closely aligns what we discuss in our room also. One is, see, David, whenever he could, he did act so that justice could happen. And when he didn't, he had the strong faith. He prayed, right? That someone more just than him, someone more perfect than him is watching. And his faith in God was very strong, even in his weaknesses, right? So that is one thing that you can do about injustice. Prayer is powerful. And therefore, one response that we can all have is to pray for the injustices that are being done. And the second, like Minnie said, was we all have circles of influence where we can act. And that first circle, the smallest circle around you is your family. Injustice, people who are unjust are somebody's children, there was someone who influenced them. There were parents who could have influenced them differently, community that could influence differently. So in that circle where we all have our circles of influence, you can act, correct things that might later lead to injustices. Any other thoughts? Okay, so just to leave you with some verses from Psalm 37, which is a beautiful psalm. Trust in the Lord and do what is right. Settle the Lord, maintain your integrity. Then you will take delight in the Lord and he will answer your prayers. Commit your future to the Lord. Trust in him and he will act on your behalf. So just leave you with those words. And on 1st August, next week, we will study 2 Samuel 5, the rest of 2 Samuel 5, that is verse 5 to 25 together. Thank you.